Today, I want to talk about a really important concept, and that is the difference between perseverance and quitting. You see, we all know stories of entrepreneurs and creatives that have been super successful because they persevered through adversity. Dyson spent over 5,000 different versions before he came up with the vacuum design that worked. Thomas Edison famously created 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb before he was able to make a light bulb. And so we see these different tales and they say, okay, look, let's push past the difficult times. Let's make sure that you don't quit when the going gets tough, and let's stay with something. But on the other hand, there's a lot of times where you start down a path and it's not a good path. And in fact, it's not going to work. It's not ever going to work. And the more time that you spend on it, the more time that you waste. And quitting actually can become one of the most powerful ways to be able to move forward into something else. Entrepreneurs are about 10% likely to succeed with any new business on average. However, if you've had a failed startup in the past, your odds of succeeding increase dramatically. And that happens for every startup up until 7 or 8 startups. You can have over 50% chance of success. And so quitting earlier startups and moving forward can actually be the right approach. So, what are we supposed to do with this information? How do we know when we're supposed to persevere and push through? And how do we know when we should quit? And I have 2 tips for how to be able to figure this out. The first is to set your metrics up front. This is really important because you need to decide how far are you willing to go for a given goal. How much are you willing to risk? How much time are you willing to spend? How many resources are you willing to spend when you're still at the beginning and you can think clearly? Once you're invested, there's a couple things that are likely to happen. 1, you become too invested to quit. You have a sunk cost fallacy. And 2, you can also, when you get into the very hard parts, you might want to quit early, right? And you don't know what your personal instinct is. So either way, what I'll do is when I start a project, I'll say, okay, this is how much time I'm willing to commit to it. And these are the metrics for success that I'm looking for. So when I started my company, I said, okay, I saved up a year's worth of savings. I said, if I am not able to make at least $5,000 a month, which is what I judged I needed for my living expenses, within 12 months of trying to start my company, I'm going to go find another job. So having that metric up front, really, really important. So if it's you're going to spend 8 months working on a game design before you're ready to pitch, and then you'll pitch for 3 months, and if you don't get traction, you'll put it on the shelf. And again, just because you quit something doesn't mean you can't come back to it later. The first version of SoulForge that I launched ended up not working out. After a couple of years, I had to shut it down. And then 5 years after that, we were able to bring it back and take those same core game principles, take some of the great work that we did, the great art that we did, and bring it into SoulForge Fusion. So just because you're quitting, it's often just a version of deferring. You take the lessons with you, and sometimes you can come back to those projects. So lesson 1 is set your metrics up front. What does success look like? How far are you willing to go while you're still calm-headed, while you're still starting the process? Lesson 2 is a little bit more subtle. And the trick here is you want to be gauging your own personal tendencies. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but some people start a lot of things and they never finish, right? If you're one of those people, you probably know what I'm talking about, right? I'm going to start this new exercise routine. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to travel. And then once things get tough, you kind of quit, get excited about something else and move on. Now, if you're one of those people, you want to be conscious of it. And a great way to figure this out is not just to sort of look back through your past, but ask your friends. I promise you, the people that are closest to you, your friends, your family, they know if you're this kind of person. You want to be pushing a little harder. You want to be leaning when in doubt, stay with something. Now, if you're the other type of person, and I definitely fall into this category, where you are a tenacious, you will stay with something no matter what, which can be a great strength, but also can be a great weakness. I will often stay with something far too long because I'm naturally competitive. I don't want to lose. I want to kind of stay with it. And so those type of people, you want to be leaning the other way, right? You want to be balancing and finding that right space in the middle. And so pay attention to your tendencies and try to correct for them. And then that will help you when you end up in those difficult situations where your metrics are kind of close, you're not quite where you need to be. Being willing to accept quitting when giving up is the right course of action, and using that to take those lessons to succeed in the next thing, moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm, is one of the most important keys to long-term success.